Hello and welcome to another exciting episode following me, Almost Immortal, as I play All the Mods 9 to the sky. I haven't really done much between episodes, mainly just adding upgrades to each of the hives and improving the resource generation. It's been a little bit of a struggle because it's starting to lag with how much is happening, so I might have to just amass some things and then turn a few things off. Last episode I said I was going to look at the thermal series machines, including the phytogenic insulator, but when we looked at the quest under the star here, we've already finished thermal series, so it might be good to move on to one of the others, such as Mechanism, and try and work towards antimatter. But as promised, I do want to explain how I set this up here in order to improve our resources, and I'll do a quick introduction now. So this was something I found on the All the Mods wiki, which is KJM's phytogenic insulator farm. So on each side, there are 8 phytogenic insulators in a row, connected to 5 of the interfaces. 4 of them on each side are connected, and I'll show you how. So all I've done is I brought a dense smart cable from a network, I've hooked it up as a separate subnet, and I've set it to stock water and phytogrow, and then I've hooked up a new controller for the subnet, and then I've hooked them up on each side, like this. So there's 4 on each side, which each have 32 channels. And that's for 32 of the interfaces that are on each side. So this is the first one I've got set up. All you do, you set the interface next to it to stock water and phytogrow from down there. The storage bus has a crafting card, which is set to craft phytogrow, and I've stocked quite a bit of phytogrow in the network just to keep a buffer. And this fills with water, and then you pop a seed in here, and it goes really fast because due to bees, we've now got a stellar integral component, which is 12 times scale factor, and 3 abyssal flux linkage amplifiers. So I've just set these up as a craft in here so that I can craft as many as I need as and when, and I'll just show you quickly. If you remember, the Polonium needed a crux, whereas if I pop it in here, no crux is needed, and it's going really, really fast. I might just leave that in there, just to increase our production, but it also uses quite a bit of power, and what I'd like to do is set up the Mechanism Reactor so that we can get much, much more power. So I'm not going to go into detail over these, but as and when we get seeds that require a crux, like the Nether Star seeds, and Polonium, Vibranium, and Unobtainium, then I'll pop them in here. I might also, in the future, remove the farm because it looks like they go faster than the lily pads. And it means that we can have everything managed here and save a bit of lag from these going. And it means that I'm not going to have lots and lots of essence constantly coming my way whenever I walk past with my Magnum. For now, though, let's look at Mechanism. For the star, we need to get antimatter and a gravitational modulating unit. And this is the start of the Mechanism quests. So I'll run through this quite quickly because we don't actually need these for anything except for an ore factory, which I'm not going to bother with, I don't think, because bees and mystical agriculture seem to be bringing in all of the resources we need for now. There is also this side here, which is for HDPE pellets and HDPE sheets, and we'll come back to that once we get to it on the Advanced Mekanism. So for now, we'll just power through this and move on to the advanced side. So looking at the Mechanism quests, the more important side of this is going to be the Thermal Evaporation Plant, which is going to allow us to get Brine and eventually Lithium. So let me get all the machines that I need to get up to this part on the quest, and that's going to include the heat generator, the electrolytic separator, the purification chamber, and the chemical injection chamber. These machines are not really important for now, but I am going to need some of them when I get onto the advanced side. There we go, that's all those. So heat generator was just for basic power generation. We've gone through the metallurgic infusers, which gets the alloys. We know the enrichment chamber, which breaks down the ores into a dust for it then to be fed into a furnace and be smelted. The electrolytic separator is something we're going to use later on to be able to separate things from liquids and gases. We'll get into that once we actually need them when we come to the reactor. There's the purification chamber, which makes clumps. And then we've already done the crusher. Take this off. And then there's the chemical injection chamber, which says it turns 3 raw ore into 8 ore shards. And I guess is going to be used for a tier 3 ore factory. But I don't think I'll go that far. What we're after is this. A thermal evaporation plant. And I believe you can build them 18 high. I'll build one, and then I'll show you how it works by turning water into brine, and then I'll set up another couple just to be able to create lithium. So we need lots of the thermal evaporation blocks. Luckily, we've got plenty of steel and plenty of copper, so I'm just going to make several stacks of these. There we are. I'm going to get rid of all these machines. We don't need those yet. And then we need 1 controller per evaporation plant. And then for the thermal evaporation valves, that's essentially the input, output, and heating. So we need 3 of those per plant. There we are. So we've done all the quest up to there. And let me show you how I set these up. So I'm going to, I think, just pop these right at the back here. What we need to do is just set a quick row of them. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And then 4 that way as well. We need to cover the base, but we don't fill in these 4 here. So they actually go just like this. So all we need to do, we need a space for the controller and space for 3 evaporation valves. We'll have 1 evaporation valve at this side, 1 at this side, and then we'll have 1 above like that. And we'll build them all just like that. And then we'll have them quite close to each other, just so that we can keep the cables nice and contained. So I'll do another one here. And then we'll match those just like that. And then we pop a controller here, just like that. And then I'll pop another one this side. And that's going to be what we use to be able to see what's happening with it. And then we just fill it in up to 18 high. So I've set 1 up there. That's 18 high. I'm going to use that as a gauge to do the others. And when it's turned on, you can see here. This is basically just your little computer inside of it. It tells you everything you need to know, how high it is, current temperature, and how much it's producing of whatever it is it's producing. Let me build another one, and I'll show you the particle effect that appears once it's finished. So you'll know if it's working or not, because once you have finished it, it'll do that with the particles. I'll do another 4 of these so that we've got 6, and then I'll set them up to show you how they work. There we go. So I've made 8 of those in the end, 4 for brine and 4 for lithium. Let's get the brine ones set up. So the first thing we need to do is get water into our thermal evaporation plants. I'm using a sink and also something from Integrated Dynamics, which is logic cables and the fluid importer. For the fluid importer, all we do is we're going to import fluids. This one. And we'll set the fluid transfer rate to the maximum it can go, which is that many 9s. And then we just add logic cables here to each of these, like this. And then finally, we add a fluid interface on the opposite side, like so. And as you can see, it's already filled the entire plant because it moves so fast. That just means that as and when this is heated up to brine, it'll constantly keep it filled up with water. Next, we just need to transfer the brine from here, which I'll use fluid pipes for, and here, all the way over to somewhere over here where a tank will collect it. Maybe about here. And I'll just place an ultimate fluid tank there. Open these, ready. And then we just need to heat it. We're going to use a resistive heater. We're going to need 2 of these because we're also going to need to heat the other side, and it's more efficient if we just have 2 of them instead of having cables running all along. I'm going to pop that just here for now, and then we'll turn that up to, let's say, 100,000, which will get it nice and hot. And then all we need to connect these up is the thermodynamic conductors, which are these. And as you can see, we're making brine. And as you can see, we're making 1,080 millibuckets a tick. This has filled this up here. We can speed this up by popping in some upgrades. And then we want to feed the brine into here for it to then make lithium. Pretty much exactly the same setup minus the sink. We don't need a sink. There we go. So I've done exactly the same thing. I've just hooked some pipes up to each of these here. This is your input, and this one at the bottom here is the output. The input comes directly from this, which is being filled from here, and goes into here. Then the output comes out and goes straight into this one, which we will then just hook up to our network. And then all we need to do is get a fluid draw. There we go. It's a new draw. I've already popped the upgrades in there, and that's slowly building up all our buckets. And when we want to turn that into lithium later for the reactor, we can do. Now that we've got lithium being made, I've just gone ahead, looked at the quest, and made the rotary condensator. And I've also made a chemical oxidizer and some sulfur dust. For the sulfur dust, I just used a pulverizer to smash down some sulfur that I got from, I think, sieving. And using the dust that I got from there, I made some seeds, and I've set it up in the crafters. So now we've got quite a bit being made here. I think it's for every 3 essence, you get 8 dust. So I've popped that in the phytogenic insulator, and it's going quite fast. The next thing to do now is to look at the advanced mechanism, which is this here. So the first thing we're going to need is the hazmat suit, because if we do get a radiation leak, it will kill us. Once we've made that, we can start making the fission reactor. I'm just going to go ahead and make the biggest one that I can make and hope that we have the resources to keep it going. And there's all the pieces for the hazmat suit, and when we start working on the reactor, at least when it's built, we will put this on first and we'll build the reactor somewhere out of the way so that if it does blow up, we won't get a big radiation leak. Next, we'll just grab all the things for the fission reactor, the glass and the casing. But for the glass, we need to make something called enriched iron, which we need a metallurgic infuser for, and you just pop coal and iron in it. I'll do that, set that up, and make a bunch of this glass and some of these reactor casings. There we go. So I've set that up with blocks of coal, iron ingots, and it's making enriched iron. And with that, I've made a bunch of the reactor glass and fission reactor casings. So the next step is to make all the bits that go in and that allow you to interact with the fission reactor. So there's the fission fuel assembly and control rod assembly. We need lots of these for the biggest one. Then there's the fission reactor port, which allows you to have inputs, outputs, and direct the waste from the fission reactor. So you can also set up a reactor failsafe with a logic adapter. You can use redstone to have it trigger to turn off. I'm going to take the risk and not bother. There we go. I've made several of the fission fuel assemblies, the control rod assemblies, and a few of the fission reactor ports. What I'll do now is set up a little island specifically for the reactor, and then I will start building it. We've got a nice little island set up just over here. Pop it in this corner out of the way. And I've mapped out a rough area of where it's going to go. I think we'll start it at this side here. And we'll have it more towards the top left-hand corner. So all we do is, first of all, we need to do 18 across and then 18 back down this way. There we go. That's the first 18. And then that's this way. So that's roughly where it's going to go. And we'll just use the wand to fill it in. There we are. So that is the floor of it. The walls don't matter so much, so we can just cover most of them like this. So all the base and the corners like this, and the bottom corner like that, and the top corners like this, all need to be reactor casings. The rest can be either the reactor glass or the casings, and you'll want to replace a few at the bottom just with the ports as well. And there we go, that's the rough shell of it. The next step I did record, but for some reason it didn't record any sound. So I'm just going to explain it to you. From the bottom, we want a diagonal pattern all the way up here. So it looks like this. All the way across, just with one gap in between them all. And we want those to be fission fuel assemblies. All the way up except for the top one, which is right below this rim here. That one, we want control rod assemblies. It's taken, I think, over 1,000 of the fission fuel assemblies to be able to make this. But it will be worth it when we've got an abundance of power. Now that those are in, the next step is to cover the sides with either the casings, the glass, or add in ports where they're going to go. For my ports, I'm going to put one here, which is going to be the water input. And then I think I'll put 4 on the top, which is going to be going directly to the turbine when we make the turbine. And then we want another one, maybe somewhere over here, which is going to be our waste extraction. Let me just make another 2 of these for the top. And there we go. And then we'll put them somewhere in the middle. Something like that, which we can then just put the pipes straight to the wind turbine. This will also give us a frame of reference on where we can build it. Then we just cover the top in with these. And then the sides, for the sides that are facing outwards, for here, I'm going to put glass so that we can see the water. For the other sides at the back and the sides leading away that we won't see, I'll just cover in casings. And there we are. That covers that off. And then it's just the glass on either of these sides. And now, because it didn't show a particle effect, it means I've not built it right. Let's find out why. There we go. So I don't know what was wrong with it. I got rid of a few and then I put them back, and now it's made itself. So at the moment, we can get a maximum of 1,920 millibuckets per tick. And that's with the maximum size fission reactor. Before we can do anything with this though, we need to move on to the next part, which is actually getting the fuel. So the fuel itself, fissile fuel, and the things that are going to make it require chemical tanks for them to be stored. So I've made a few of these ultimate chemical tanks. I've also made a brand new extended drive with 10 16 million megachemical storage cells in them. They can hold 5 types of chemical each, and it just means that I'll be able to store the chemical that I need. So the first thing we're going to want to do, following the quest, is make sulfuric acid. And to get this, we need to start by making sulfur dioxide by putting sulfur dust through a chemical oxidizer. So I'm going to try and get as much as I can to begin with. I'll pop a chest there to hold all the sulfur, which will come straight from my network. And then I'll pop some chemical oxidizers down, just here. That's 5 of them. Connect some pipes up to there. And then we just need to fill this with sulfur dust. I'll have this come straight from the network. What I've done is made a little subnet, and I've already set sulfur dust to be stocked. There we are. That's slowly stocking. There we go. That's a full chest of sulfur dust. And now we just need an output for them. We also need to power them. There we are. They're all on. And they're creating sulfur dioxide. So now we just need a way to transfer that. To do that, I'll just use these pressurized tubes. There we go. And we'll feed that straight into a chemical tank. Just like that. So next, we need to make oxygen. So to get oxygen, we just need to feed water into an electrolytic separator, and it'll make both hydrogen and oxygen. What I'll do is I'll set a few of these up and just put a sink attached to it and have them drain straight into the network. So there we go. Pretty similar setup to the other one. Just provide power. And then as with the other ones, I'll also add some upgrades to them to make them go a bit faster. There we go, we've got hydrogen and oxygen being made. So in order to export these properly, I've set the configuration for the front to output the second one and the bottom to output the first one. So the bottom will output hydrogen and the front will output oxygen. And what I'll do is I'll just put a tank underneath to catch all the hydrogen, and then I'll feed it into the network. So I'll just pop a pressurized tube across here, which catches all the hydrogen. There we go. And then I'll have that feed straight into a chemical tank. Just like that. That's filling up. And then we just add an import bus and have that feed straight into our new chemical drives. There we are, and that's draining in. And then we'll do the same on this side. And we'll have all those feed into this tank here. And then we just need a chemical infuser between these, just like this. Like that. And then we have to remember to set the right outputs on this. And that's making sulfur trioxide. I noticed that the sulfur dioxide production isn't as good as the oxygen. So I'm just going to add a few more here and see if we can increase that. There we go. So I've set 15 of these up now. Hopefully that should be enough. It's still not competing really with the oxygen, but that should be fine. We've got a good amount of sulfur trioxide already in our chemical tank. So the last thing to do to get sulfuric acid is we need to make water vapor. I'm going to do that by first just popping these here. So these are just rotary condensators. If you pop water in them, it'll just turn it straight into water vapor. I'll pop it into another tank, similar to the others, and I'll have it feed into the network so that I can pipe it out over here. I've moved one of the rotary condensators just to make room for a chemical tank, and I've hooked it up to the network here. So now we've got water vapor going in. I noticed it was going in quite slow, so I've upgraded the import buses to extended import buses, so they're going in much faster now. Now I just needed to set the extended interface to have water vapor being stocked, which I can then set to output over here to make sulfuric acid. There we go, I've hooked a tank up to my network. That's got water vapor coming in. That's feeding straight into a chemical infuser, and you can see the sulfur trioxide with the water vapor is making sulfuric acid. So let's see what we need to do next. We need to make hydrofluoric acid, which is taking our sulfuric acid and combining it with fluorite in a chemical dissolution chamber. So here's the chemical dissolution chamber. I've already set it up down there with an export bus to get fluorite. All I need to do is tell the interface to stock fluorite, just like that. And then we just transfer the sulfuric acid over here. Look at that. That's hydrofluoric acid. So that's the first half of our fissile fuel done. The next half is this here. We need to first get some yellow cake uranium, which is just putting uranium in an enrichment chamber. I'm going to go make a pattern for that so that we can make it on demand as and when, and I'll also put a crafting card in our interface so that we can have that craft as and when needed. I'll then set it to make maybe 10,000 just so that we've got plenty to the side. There we are. Crafting card, yellow cake uranium, all set up. Ready for our next step. So I'll put the chemical oxidizers over here. And then we'll pop a cable up here from the network with an export bus. We'll have that set to export yellow cake uranium. Just like that. And then I'll just pop a chest on top of here. Just like we did back here. And then we'll just have some pipes feeding that into here. Open that. Give it an upgrade. And there we go. We have a full chest of yellow cake uranium. That's feeding into here. So this should turn it into uranium oxide. We just need to send some power over here. And there we are. I'll add some upgrades to make them faster and more efficient. And then I'll just pipe this out into another tank, just like all the others. There we are, and that's uranium oxide. So now we just need to take the hydrofluoric acid and the uranium oxide and feed it into a chemical infuser to make uranium hexafluoride. So we'll do that, add some upgrades, feed those in, and then we just give it power. Now we just need to make an isotopic centrifuge, one of these things. Feed the uranium hexafluoride in there. And there we go. We're making fissile fuel. I'm just going to feed this straight into the network and store it. And there we have it. We're now making fissile fuel and it's going into the network. We could optimize this a little bit by improving our output of things. It looks like the uranium oxide is going fast enough, but it looks like the other side, where we're creating the sulfuric acid, could do with a little improvement, just to keep it up. So before I finish here on fissile fuel, I thought I'd show you I've upgraded it a wee little bit. I found that the chemical infuser that was making the sulfuric acid didn't have the upgrades in them, so I've added that, and I've added an extra one as well. I've also added one extra chemical dissolution chamber and hooked those up to here. So we're now full on the chemical infuser that is making uranium hexafluoride, and that will slowly build up. We've now got fissile fuel being made, and if we have a quick look, we've already got 1,048 buckets of it. And look at how fast that's already going up. So now that we've got plenty of fissile fuel, we can power the reactor. But before I do that, I'd like to look at the quests and build a turbine. The turbine is just a big structure similar to the reactor, and you just pop in the heated coolant that comes out of the reactor and it turns it into power. I want to make the biggest one now, which is 17 by 17 by 18. And I'll just gather the things together now to do that. So I'm going to use these pipes as a reference to where the turbine's going to go. And I think I'll do it about 3 tall, which will be about that high. And that'll be where the turbine starts. I've placed the valves here, just at the end of there, because that's going to mimic the ones at the bottom here for the ports. And this is going to act as our input for the heated coolant. There we are, so that's going to be our base. All I'm going to do now is fill it in, and that will be 17 by 17. And then we go up 18. There we are, that's the base of it. Now we just need to do the 4 corners. There we are, and we just connect these together. And just like when we did the reactor, that's our frame. Next, we just want to pop some turbine vents down. I think these can go 4 from the top. Just like this. There we are. Next, we want the turbine rotors, just in the middle here. The turbine rotors want to come to the level just under the turbine vents. On top of that, we'll go a rotational complex, like that. And then surrounding this, we want pressure dispersers. And this wants to go all the way up to the wall here. Just like that. Then the top of this, you put these electromagnetic coils. Now it says in the quest that 7 is the maximum, which would be that many. But it says when you ponder that 5 is. So I'm going to try it like this and see what happens. And then we just finish the top off with these here, turbine vents. Just like that. And then we need to add some turbine blades just to here. And then finally, we add some structural glass. I'm also going to put another port just so that I can take power from it. So we'll pop 2 turbine valves down here. One just here and one just here. And the rest will fill in with the structural glass. And there we go. The red particle effect shows it was a success. So hopefully we've not buggered anything up. Now all we do is connect these with the pressurized tubes. But first we need to set these as outputs. To choose the ports, we're going to use one of these, a configurator. All you do is crouch, and then we right click on there. That's output waste, output coolant. That's what we're after. And then we just pop them there like that and connect them straight up to these. Just like that. So now when we produce coolant, it should just fire straight into here. And while we've got the configurator, this should be an input. We want one for output waste. There we are. Now we're about ready to put some fissile fuel in there. Let's get the fission reactor up and running. I've already set an output for the nuclear waste into an isotopic centrifuge, which is going to make plutonium. And then this one here, pressurized reaction chamber, is going to make plutonium pellets. I've got water and fluorite dust exporting from a network. So when we do get the plutonium going, this should make our pellets. Over here, I need to set up a water output similar to the thermal evaporation plants. So that's just going to be a sink with a fluid importer, a logic cable, fluid interface, and then we pop the variable card in here and increase the speed to maximum. There we go. As you can see, that fills it up nice and quick. So we're about ready. I am missing one input for the fission fuel. So I'll put one in now. Nice and easy. You just take one of those out. Pop a port in. And then that kicks back in. Now I've just set up a cable to export my fissile fuel here. I'll use an extended export bus to make sure we've got enough exporting through. And then I'll fill it with acceleration cards. And then top it off with an ultimate chemical tank. Set that to fissile fuel, and then there we go. Now all we need to do is have that feed in. There we go, fissile fuel. And then, if we come in here, we can set our burn limit. So the limit is set to 0.1 millibuckets at the moment, but the max burn rate can be 1,920 millibuckets. Let's have it on 500 and see if we can keep up with it. Activate that. And things seem to be moving well. Let's check on this. And that's filling up nice and well. All we do here is put a flux plug like that. And that'll transfer the power back to our network. In an attempt to try and store some of this massive amount of power that I've generated, I've made several of these ultimate energy cubes, and I've just set the input for back there and the output for each of these, so it's passing to there and then there and then there and so on until it comes to here. And then I've set this to have no limit so that it can just keep sending whatever power it needs. This should power us for as long as we need now, I think, providing we've got the fissile fuel to keep us going. Looking at this, the fissile fuel is not going down, and the tank's full. And we've still got 15,000 in here. It is being drained quite quickly though, so we might have to try and make some more. In the meantime though, we can have power here. So now we've got nuclear waste being fed into the isotopic centrifuge. That's feeding into the pressurized reaction chamber, and we're making plutonium. Here we go. Plutonium should build up now until we make plutonium pellets. And here we go. Already got some pellets. Now what we need to do is also get rid of the nuclear waste. What we'll do for that is we'll pop them under here. There we go. And then we'll just have the pellets pop straight into a chest here. There we go. So that's the plutonium pellets being made. We've got plenty of those now, and we'll need those for the supercritical phase shifter. So I think this is a good place to end this one. We've got the fission reactor, the wind turbine, both at max size. We've got the thermal evaporation plants making brine and lithium. We've got everything in our network. We've got our fissile fuel being made. Yeah, it's been productive. I think next time we will look at making the supercritical phase shifter and the fusion reactor, and then move over to making antimatter pellets. And that should get us ready towards the star. Thanks a lot for joining me on this one. I hope you've had a great time. I have. See you next time.